How are you, Mikey?
Yeah, I'm good, mate. How you getting on?
Good, good, good. Okay, so wanted to record this. I thought it was a good idea when you mentioned it, just to have a bit of breakdown on the debate we had with regards to three players. A lot of times,
Yeah,
what happens is that when you're in the middle of a debate, you start saying stuff and you have a thought out answer, but then you think back and you either agree with what you said, you disagree with what you said, or you have things that, oh, I wish I'd said a bit more of this. Where are you at with the whole debate thing after the Scholes Lamp? For people to know, it's the Scholes
yeah,
Lampard debate.
yeah. We sat down and debated the merits of Scholes, Lampard, and Gerrard, and obviously I was back in Scholes. Um, I mean, first of all, I enjoyed the debate, I'm not sure the point of that debate was ever going to be for somebody to settle it. I don't think that's ever gonna
That's
happen.
never going to
It's
happen.
quite tribal. It's the point of view of obviously, yeah, just getting across your point, and it is interesting to hear why people see it differently as well. Um, I think everyone put across the points in an interesting way as well. I think when I actually listened back to hear what the other guys were saying, and so again, it's not a case of trying to sort of change anyone's mind because I just don't think you're going to do that. I think where I was like, I just don't get that point of view at all was, first of all, this idea that Scholes wasn't even like third and not even close to being to the other two. I mean, I found that quite laughable, to be honest, but that is what that is, right? And yeah, I think that came down to kind of two major points. There's going to be a third little one as well that I might touch on at the end of it, but it was really the two main points, I think, with this kind of a blanket approach to stats, rather than going off what you remember and what you saw, and then actually interpreting what happened, and then going to the stats to go, actually, I'm gonna sense check a lot of this to being like, oh, I saw these stats on a website somewhere, and then I saw these stats on a website somewhere, therefore I think I'm never really gonna be that guy, to be honest. I think if that's what we're doing, we don't need to have a debate. We could just post the link up there and just
Totally.
and leave it. So I think that can happen a lot in these kind of debates. Whereas I think, for example, you saw with the stats that I put forward, I've gone and found those stats. Do you know what I mean? I've gone through season by season to look at those, and I'd seen a lot of people that make the argument, because the thing is, you can see a lot of these arguments online, and you hear a lot of people saying, well, Lampard has the goals and assist stats. And what was really interesting when I found with Scholes is that, and it matches what I remember of him, is that his career really did break down into two halves. And really, his entire game was different over those two halves. For the first 10/11 seasons, Scholes played in a Man United team that very much played. Remember, Scholes was the first to break into the team as well. Scholes' career starts first in the mid-90s. United very much played 4-4-2, very much kind of I want to say basic, because we were incredibly efficient at it, but our tactics were quite simple. 4-4-2, get down the wings, whip it in, commit players into the box, outscore teams. That's pretty much what United did. There'd be two forwards on, three forwards, four forwards. If Ferguson needs to throw them on, he would. Scholes' role in that team was really quite simple. Get the ball out your feet and try and play somebody in, or chip it over the top for somebody, or ping it out wide and get in the box and get on the end of it. That's pretty much what Scholes has spent the first 10/11 years of his career doing. And over that period of time, playing as a number 10, but then very much more as a number 8 with a license to get forward, Scholes had better goals and assists combined than both of those two players, including Frank Lampard, who's considered to be the ultimate goals and assist player. Now, those stats, I think, were quite clear. But if you look at it over a body of work, you also then, I think with the other players, you saw players transition their way of playing over a period of time. Scholes didn't really do that. And it's important to understand the context and then look at the numbers and go, oh, that's really, really interesting. I want to know the story. I want us to deep dive into the statistics, not just present them. Like, for example, and it's obviously not to pick on people here, but G was adamant Scholes had never played in the Champions League final because he read it on a website. And then was like, oh, actually, he did play. I'd be like, well, just go and look at the lineup so you see it for yourself, right? He played. So, do you know what I mean? It's like, you've got to be careful where you're getting your information from. And I think, again, what I also did, because obviously, again, looking at it over 10, 11 seasons, I know Gerrard sort of started off as a little bit more as a defensive midfield player. Do you know what I mean? So it's a case of going, oh, okay, so whether that's over 10 or 11 seasons, Scholes has the stats that proves himself as a forward-thinking midfield player. But then, if you go back, say, towards the second half of his season then, I did the same thing. I went through season by season to look at something else. And it was a question that you asked G. You asked G, was Scholes more of a sat-nav than Gerrard then? I think you asked that kind of question. So I looked at Scholes' stats going back from, I tried to go back 8 seasons from when he retired, because 8 seasons back from when he retired is when Scholes was more of a, that's when Keane left, and that's when Scholes started to play a hell of a lot deeper in the United team. But unfortunately, in the Premier League website, I couldn't find the 05-06 stats for any of the players on passing. So what I did instead is I went back to when Scholes retired, which was 12/13. I went back to 7 seasons from there. Took him up to 06-07. I then did the same thing for the other 2 players. They both retired or left the Premier League at the 14-15 season. They left after that. So I did the same, worked back 7 seasons, and I looked at passes per game and long-range accurate passes per game.
Yeah, okay.
Probably guess the order here, but just to give you an idea, again, Scholes' passes per game and average over that period of time is 61.19 per game.
Okay.
Gerrard's was 57.23. Lampard's were 46.54.
Okay. Okay.
But then you look at the accurate long passes per game. Scholes, 8.14. Gerrard, 5.68. Lampard was 3.80. Probably wasn't as much his game though. But again, apparently these guys are saying that Scholes isn't fit for the conversation and being part of the debate. If you look at you look at some numbers like that, you go, well, actually that tells quite a story. Like Scholes was an absolute sat-nav of a player, and I think that absolutely answers the debate, was Scholes the best sat-nav? Well, that's really what he did. Do you know what I mean? So now, but again, that's not to take away the point that maybe somebody like a Steve Gerrard did more things over a period of time. Scholes did one very specific role and then did another specific role. But if you look at the stats over the whole body of work, I get that, well, then Gerrard's stats shine really well in that period of time. But then that comes to another thing that Gerrard said. He called at one point, G called Gerrard Roy the Rovers. Do you remember? He was like Roy the Rovers type player. United didn't need Roy the Rovers.
Yeah.
We just had a fantastic team instead. Do you know what I mean? United in the 80s had Roy the Rovers. We had Brian Robson because we needed Roy the Rovers. We were he was the player that gave us that hope that we could be relevant again because we weren't winning the big trophies. But come that team that Scholes and Giggs and these players were primed and developed for, which became this dynasty of a winning football team, we didn't need Roy the Rovers doing 5 or 6 different jobs. Do you know what I mean? So that brings me into the idea of pressure.
Yeah.
This is something that I thought
that was the thing that I was picking on, saying that playing football without pressure versus playing football with all the pressure creates different types of footballers. So sure. I picked on that. Yeah.
Let me ask you a question on that then, Aali. Who usually has the most pressure, the underdog or the favourite?
Hard to wait. I can tell you the answer, which is the right answer, but I want to know if you're going down the route of were Man U favourites or was Scholes the favourite?
Right. So again, first of all, I think a step back from that again.
Okay.
Who are we concerned about pressure-wise? Because I think the way you framed it, you were talking about the media. And who are they talking about? And who are the commentators talking about? And who's the talking? Yeah, right. Yeah. So a question. First of all, who needed who most in that relationship between United and the media? Simple question. The media needed Manchester United more than Manchester United needed the media. United is a franchise brand. It has a story about the Munich air disaster into the rebuild into the 60s. It's a chip that Liverpool fans still wear on their shoulder because they won so much in the 70s and the 80s. But they're like, why does everybody still want to talk about Manchester United? And then Manchester United blows up again in the 90s when the Premier League begins. And you've got this brand that is literally everywhere. You go anywhere in the world and you say Manchester, they say United. Like, that's what the franchise is. we didn't care what the media said. Ferguson used absolute, siege mentality. Ferguson famously didn't care so much that when he had his legal issues with the BBC, he didn't speak to them. Do you know what I mean? Like, so look, you're in that Manchester United dressing room, right? Let's look at Gerrard, for example. So the idea was, what would happen if Gerrard had gone to a club where he'd won more trophies? Because Gerrard's sitting there with a trophy average of 0.56 trophies every season, right?
Okay. Yeah.
He's got a cup final named after him. Fair play. Like, he's often turned up in those kind of games. And as well as that, so yeah, 0.56 trophies. It'd be an average that if you were to look at that in the Manchester United dressing room as somebody who couldn't win the league but had done well in some cup finals, they would probably consider it, choose my words carefully here, cute. That's probably how they look at it, because you're looking at a Man United dressing room that's winning 3 trophies every 2 seasons, bro. That is the expectation. We didn't want to win trophies. You had to win trophies. Every game. What happened if United lost in the game? Any league game? Massive news story, right? Massive news story. I heard you say one time, Aali, anybody but Man U. I heard that a lot as a kid. Anybody but Man U. We were hated because we serially won game after game after game after game. A lot of players couldn't handle that at Manchester United. You saw a lot of players that didn't manage to last the course because they would do well for a couple of seasons, and then Ferguson would look them in the eye and go, "You've lost the hunger. You've lost the yard. You've lost," and you were out. Liverpool wanted to win at that time. Manchester United had to win at that time. Chelsea had to win at that time. But when they didn't, who generally got the chop? The manager. That never happened at Manchester United. You want to see a pre-season where United haven't won the league? Bear in mind, United over that period of time won more leagues than everyone else put together. So it didn't happen that often because you were in a dressing room of elite mentality, focused winners. Elite. A lot of players couldn't handle that. Scholes didn't just survive that. Scholes thrived to the point where when Scholes tried to retire, he was begged back out of retirement. Why did Ferguson do that? It's like, I need you to show the levels. Please come back. Come back and win another league title before he went. Scholes didn't care about the pressure of what the media said. Scholes had to deal with Sir Alex Ferguson. Scholes had to deal with Roy Keane the first part. You try and misplace a pass with Roy Keane next to you and see what happens to you. In the words of Roy Keane, do me a favour. Do you know what I mean? You're in trouble. So that idea of pressure, I really found that to be very much misplaced, because I think if you were around the culture that went on in that team at that point, it was special. And these players were the class of '92 were almost bred for it. They were almost bred for it. Interesting correlation to the timeline here. United's class of '92, United's first Premier League title for 26 years, '93. Those players come through into this culture at the start of a dynasty. Many of them couldn't. They were bred for it, but Butt didn't last. Phil Neville didn't last. David Beckham didn't last. How many managers would have got rid of David Beckham? But Ferguson, you're distracted. You need to go. Yeah. Gary Neville did very well, but even at the end, his form tailed off and he just retired because he knew what was coming. It doesn't matter how well you've been to Ferguson. If your legs are starting to go, you are out of here, because you're dealing with Alex Ferguson and he's here for one thing only, to win. Not want to win, must win every season. And the 2 diamonds that survived under that kind of pressure, and that's how diamonds are made, was Giggs and Scholes. They were the 2 that lasted the course. Scholes went into the sunset with Ferguson and we haven't won a league title since. You know what I mean? It's something that still really pains me and something I want to see change. But for me, Scholes was, it wasn't just about then the stats are showing, well, how good he was as the license to attack, goals and assists, where he had the best stats over that period, to him having the best passing stats in the second period. Like, that's what we needed from Scholes. He didn't need to be Roy of the Rovers. We had a great team, and Scholes gave the team what it needed, and he did it quietly, he did it efficiently, and you know what? The United fans really understand that, and that's why sometimes I think it gets lost on a lot of people that then just go, but if you look at the stats over the whole career as one piece and just throw that up and then, almost dismiss Scholes, they can get lazy in their argument because they're not looking at the minutiae. They're not looking at season by season and understanding the story of that. But then this player has more trophies than the other two put together for a reason. Like, he survived in a team. It's almost like, oh, but Scholes got to play in that team, so he was lucky. Bro, how many teams at that level allow passengers? We've worked in kind of people where in performance situations, if you're not contributing under somebody like a taskmaster like Sir Alex Ferguson, you are out of here. But Scholes is one other thing of the stats that's really interesting. So then when you come into the second part of Scholes' career and he has all them stats the way he does, when you look at that over the body of work, because he didn't do much pass and move in the first 10, 11 years, his stats look lower because his job was to get the ball, get it out to the wings, get in the box, or chip it over and get an assist. Second half of the career, United have massively changed because we couldn't continuously win European trophies. Ferguson had to adapt to what the Europeans were bringing over to the game. Nobody contributed more to Ferguson's adaptation than Arsene Wenger. Arsene Wenger challenged everything. Back then, speak to him about this. They were talking about it was Le Professeur versus some dinosaur. Do you remember? Ferguson being some outdated. What did Ferguson do? He went and got Carlos Queiroz and he adapted the United game. And then if you look at the next dynasty, the team that wins the European Cup in Moscow, you've got 3 fluid forwards. We see that a lot today, don't we? 3 fluid forwards, Ronaldo, Tevez and Rooney. And Scholes and Carrick are deep lying. And their job is no longer to just supply these players. Their job is to control the game, control the tempo, when to break the lines, when to actually drop so deep that you pull their midfield onto you so you can get the ball in behind them. It's control the game. So Scholes' stats in that period that I gave, that shows that's exactly what he was doing. But he wasn't then charging forward and scoring an assist anymore because his job was to do that. Whenever Scholes, do you remember the Champions League semi-final goal against Barcelona? That was a shock to everyone because Scholes didn't pop up like that anymore. That one in the top corner that I put in the little video.
Yeah.
That happened. Scholes wasn't that player anymore. So that's what made that so special. But against that, in that game against Barcelona, we needed something else on the night. So Scholes kind of rolled back the years. But Scholes didn't do that anymore. Scholes' job was to be deep lying and to run the team. So you've got to look at what was actually going on. And then I knew that without the stats. When I looked at the stats, I was like, oh, that makes perfect sense. One thing I'd forgotten is Keane left in 2005 because the stats to me were so different on either side of that. And I was like, oh, that's where, and then I looked at, that's where Roy Keane left. Well, that makes perfect sense because Keane was the guy that held down shop. You had Keane in the middle. You had Jaap Stam before him, Pallister or Bruce, and you had the great Peter Schmeichel. Everyone else in those early United teams, go forward and attack. That was pretty much it. Scholes, go forward and attack, or get the ball out to the wings to make sure that Beckham and Giggs are being fed correctly. Fullbacks overlap, which were Gary Neville and Dennis Irwin, and go and outscore teams. And United weren't. I'll go on record as saying I think Arsenal probably played the best Premier League football in that era. I don't think we played as good a football as Arsenal. I think we played exciting football. Yeah. And we played the most aggressively offensive football. But Arsenal changed the way football played here. And you've seen now how much more of a continental style we've gone to as these kind of coaches and players have come into the game. And I think the game's better for it. But United played an attacking, direct brand of football. That's what we played. So, I think that tells a story in the stats. And I think the pressure thing was my main thing. The pressure thing was like, I felt like the idea that Scholes was able to have his career he had without dealing with the coldest of pressure that comes from surviving and thriving under Alex Ferguson when everyone else near enough didn't manage to achieve that. Only Giggs stands next to him lasted the course.
Yeah, fair. That's fair.
So I had to take the pressure thing on, bro. And then there's one other thing I'll say before we get on to something else you want to talk about. The England thing, right? Who's bringing up examples of failure to back up their argument, Ali? Did it work? Building around Lampard and Gerrard. Did England win a trophy or something? Or did is that something that we should be highlighting? If this is the other way around, right, and Scholes, they built around Scholes instead, and we had that record, I'd be trying to hide that one under the carpet. I wouldn't be going, well, look at what the managers did, right? England.
I think the argument wasn't necessarily the results, but the best team in England at the time was
Not
holding off.
select was not selected, I think, because if you build around Scholes, perhaps if you had a look at what Alex Ferguson was doing, showing everyone how to win more trophies than everyone else combined together, perhaps Scholes might have changed the result. Perhaps he wouldn't have. Who knows? The point is that he wasn't. He was packed out onto the left wing, and then McLaren got the job and begged him to come back twice, but McLaren had been Ferguson's number 2, right? So he knew what Scholes was. And then Fabio Capello begged him to come back as well. But by that point, he was like, you didn't just play Scholes out of position like marginally. You could have gone, Scholes, could you go forward a bit again? Could you play as a number 10? Could you play as a number 8? Could you play as a number 6? You took a midfield maestro, an absolute Rolls Royce of a player in the middle, and you put him on the left wing. He's 5'5", 5'6", 5'6", severe asthma, can't run like quite the same, and you put him out on the left. I don't blame Scholes for going. When these people came back, he went, "Nah, you had your chance. You absolutely blew it. You wasted his best years." So, yes, you can argue to say, well, look, they picked Gerrard and Lampard. Yeah, but it failed miserably. It was the biggest failure of the England history, was that generation. They should have won something, that golden generation. They didn't. Yeah. So I wouldn't be highlighting failure to back up my argument, would be my one last point on there. So that, I think, is my 3 points that I took from there. I think the guys argued their points well. I just felt they were laboured points I'd heard before, and I felt like we needed to deep dive into them. And I feel like they were a bit too quick to dismiss Scholes, which is why they looked at the surface level of stats and went, oh, it's actually about Gerrard versus Lampard. That's what I felt. Well, I went into it a lot more because I think I respect Lampard and Gerrard more than they kind of respect Scholes' ability. I think even you said you were surprised that Scholes finished his like. Compared to Owen Hargreaves at one point.
Yeah, for me, I probably wouldn't have put Scholes third. I don't actually know my order, but Scholes wouldn't have finished third, just because I grew up watching this guy, and I probably watched more of him and Gerrard than I did of Lampard. And I also would go to say that. Yeah, no, for me, Scholes is probably number 2, just because he didn't have to do everything. Lampard, I don't know if he sits in my... Yeah.
His goals and assists are pretty special. Look, to me, again, I don't think...
Very special. No, they're very, very special.
My issue, Ali, is not that they settled or that they saw Scholes first, second or third. It's not that. It was the level below. I couldn't let that lie because actually it's nonsensical. And if
that Hargreaves comment was pretty harsh.
If you look at this, do you know what I mean? Or the amount of times I heard Scholes was good. Scholes was good. Do you know what I mean? You need to understand the culture of Alex Ferguson's Manchester United team. It was absolute winner's circle. You had to be elite, and Scholes was elite at 2 very particular jobs. I'd say that perhaps where you look at it over the body of work is the fact that he never quite he went from all about goals and assists to all about running the team. There wasn't really a middle period where he kind of transitioned. He didn't gradually go back. It was like he went number 10, number 8, number 10 quickly again, number 8, and then almost like a number 6 in the style. Him and Carrick were almost both like number 6s because Ferguson was trying to adapt to, we need to now start winning more European trophies. And that team grew up in Europe at that period of time. We got to another 2 finals. Unfortunately for us, we came up against Barcelona twice. And that Pep team that just kind of changed the manual. But that team changed, and Scholes, this is why I said Scholes was more important in that position. But then you could say, yeah, but his output, look at his goals and assists. Yeah, but look at his passes. It's a different job. But that United team needed Scholes. And I think the team first, I don't know if it needed him quite the same, but it didn't play that sort of game. Scholes was just like another wave of attack. That's how he was mainly used. But you don't need to be Roy the Rovers, right? What's he going to do? Start running in Keane's positions and start running in Beckham's positions? He'd be like, what the fuck? He'd be out of the team. Like, what are you doing? You're there to do that. Gerrard never had that luxury, but then Gerrard also never moved on to another team. What would Gerrard have done in a team, in a dressing room like Manchester United? I don't know. Would he have been better than Beckham? I don't know. Beckham was superb. Would he have been better than Keane? Like, I don't know. I don't know if he'd have had the mentality to win. I never saw it. He averaged a trophy every 2 years. I don't know if he would have been able to do. I don't know. He might have done. I'm not saying he wouldn't. I just never saw it.
Yeah.
You can't discuss Scholes who managed to actually get that done. Do you know, Scholes did have the chance to go abroad as well. They were saying he didn't. Like, Inter Milan offered a blank check. But do you know what Scholes, do you know what was the message that came back to Inter was, if you want to manage Paul Scholes, you'll need to buy Manchester United. Wasn't for sale. It just wasn't. So I think people made bids for Gerrard because they always thought at some point, if it doesn't work at Liverpool, he'll have to, and respect. You hear the same thing about Alan Shearer, by the way, at Newcastle.
Yeah, I agree.
You know, why didn't he kick on? But he wanted to be where he was. There's nothing wrong with that. But you can't, I wouldn't hold that against Scholes because Scholes was where he wanted to be. The team he supported, the team he came through that was winning all the time under that great manager. Why would you be like, I'm going to leave here just for the sake of leaving here? You know.
Totally.
So that's why I had to break that down. So yeah, the England thing.
I'm going to put this same question to Dev and Graham, but I'm not going to let them see this. And I want them
it's really cool if we all don't see each other's responses and it goes up. What we thought, that was just my key things. Again, I might be really, really harsh there. It's just it's not about them. I don't expect them to think Scholes was best. Like, I don't think we're here to settle the argument. But when I heard the things, some of the kind of dismissive things, I was like, yeah, I think we're watching a different game, guys. Like, and that's cool. But I'm going to break down why I think it was a bit nonsensical to compare him to Owen Hargreaves or to say he was like a level or two down from the other two. For those reasons I've given, I just think it was absolutely nonsensical and dismissive, and probably should do with a bit more deep diving into the stats. But
no, I quite enjoyed your breakdown of it, and probably took more away from this conversation than I did from that debate with regards to Scholes, because I think when you're just going off on like, this is why it's great, this is why it's great, this is why it's great, rather than this is why we think he's not great, okay, let me tackle that. I think that is probably a more fruitful conversation than this is why it's great, this is why it's great, this is why it's great.